Today we're going to talk about the surface technique called incising, which we will be doing on our pendants / fidget stones. But first I want to talk about how you're actually going to create the shape of your fidget stone. I want to try to get us away from the habit of always rolling a slab with a rolling pin and cutting the shape out, and show you that some of these things can easily be done just by pinching. So think of this as a pinch pot, just flat. So as you can see here, I started with a small ball of clay, and again, just by twisting this around and gently pinching, I am getting this little pendant-like shape. Now, of course, these are probably naturally going to end up being round, so if you are interested in a different shape, just see if you can gently tap the edges of your pendant on the surface of the table to see if you can, flatten them, maybe get a square, experiment with shapes this way. I just think this looks so much more natural and organic than those harshly cut edges that you get when you roll a slab and slice it out. So get the surface as smooth as you can, and then we'll put it aside, and I'm going to talk about transfer techniques. You should have pre-drawn your design to be incised on a piece of tracing paper, and there are a few ways to get this design right onto the clay to make it easier for you. One way that I like to use is basically treating your transfer paper like a temporary tattoo. This really only works if the lead you are using is loose. So I have found that mechanical pencils work, not so much number 2 pencils. So if you try this and you do not get this result, let me know and I can give you a type of pencil that will absolutely work. And this is nice because it doesn't leave any imprints on your clay, so if you do not like the placement or the drawing, you can always swipe it away and redo it. So to clarify, the graphite must be touching the clay. If you leave it so that the graphite is facing up, nothing will transfer. Additionally, one very important thing to note is with this method, your design is ultimately going to end up backwards because you're flipping your paper over. If you do not want your design to end up backwards, you will have to retrace your design on the back side of your tracing paper and then put the back side down onto the clay. Now what I'm doing here is another method. Let's say your surface is rounded or you just aren't getting the desired effect you want with the graphite transfer. Another thing you can do is lay your design down and take a needle tool and poke holes along your design and through the paper and into the clay. This creates a connect the dots effect that you can then go in and connect when we begin the incising. The last method of transfer I'm going to show you is pretty much the same thing. However, instead of poking holes, you will simply take a ballpoint pen and drag the pen across the lines of your design. To be more successful, I am holding my pen at a bit of an angle so it is more flat against the paper so that it is less likely to puncture through. So be gentle but firm enough so that you are leaving behind an impression on the clay. Then peel away and you can reveal your transfer design, which you can now go in and incise. Now, to incise means simply to cut into, carve, or engrave. To begin, I'm going to show you what I do not want to see and what I see way too often. I am not going to use a needle tool on really soft plastic clay. The needle tool is pretty much the worst tool you can use for this because it is too sharp and too thin that essentially it just cuts the clay, it goes way too deep, and it leaves a line that is way too thin that glaze cannot easily flow into it, and it ultimately does not look very nice. You can even see here the fact that I am carving into clay that is too soft. The clay isn't holding firm and it is moving as I drag that horizontal line across the H. Putting that aside, these are the tools that are much more successful for creating a nice incised line. I honestly always prefer a dull pencil, but something like this hook tool or even this small loop tool will do the trick, and I will show you what each is like. Again, hold that pencil line at a bit of an angle so it's less likely to drag and create those rough burrs, but the dullness of the pencil, not as pointy as the needle tool, and the fact that this clay is leather hard results in a much cleaner, broader line. Ultimately, what I'm going to want to do is clean up all those little burrs of clay that rise from the pencil, because what the pencil is doing is pushing the clay to either side. However, what I'm going to probably end up having to do is waiting until this is even drier so that I can brush the crumbs away without getting them stuck inside the incised lines. Now, if you can find and you decide to use one of those hook tools, rather than pushing the clay to the side like the pencil, it's actually removing some of the clay. So you might not get as many burrs if your clay is leather hard enough. I know you can't see it because my hand is in the way, but that hook tool, I am pulling the broad face of it forward. I am not using it to slice with the edge. Lastly, you have this little loop tool, which personally for me makes lines that are too thick. So I tend to only want to use this if I'm taking big chunks or making bigger broad lines. If you have a lot of detail, the pencil or the hook tool would be your better friend. So you can see that does a great job of pulling the clay away. However, the lines are much wider. So what I'll just use this for is to show you that you can use it for a little extra design around your pendants. And notice how those little bits of clay are just falling away. That's a sign that it is leather hard enough. If the clay is sticking to your tools, it might be too soft to continue incising, and you need to put it aside and let it dry a little further. So this is done. The last thing I need to do now is wait for this to dry further and clean out all of those crumbs. I do not want to see any crumbs on your incised pendants. Once it's dry, it should be easier to brush away, or you can use a dried paintbrush to help get it out of those nooks and crannies. Slow and steady, neat and tidy.